From Democratic Services, and Michael Hurt, Better Care Fund Manager. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Humphries. As ever with this sort of process, tonight's recommendations to Cabinet are simply that we agree to consider the report and recommendations, and that we agree to give a formal response at a subsequent Cabinet meeting. But I know that Councillor Goldberg would like to make some initial comments and responses tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Humphries and to Scrutiny for the report. I think it's a good, solid piece of work, and it actually complements the carer strategy, as you mentioned, which has been formed over the similar sort of period of time as this as the work on Scrutiny. So I think it's a valuable piece of work, and actually it was the right thing to go back to the council meeting where we had quite a debate about whether it should go to scrutiny or not. I think it was a good thing for it to go to scrutiny, and we've got some good value out of it, and it's added value to the carer strategy. So as the leader mentioned, we will, and in the recommendation that we'll consider it as a cabinet group. I think actually we can pretty much agree with all of the recommendations anyway, but we'll come back as is the process and give a formal response. But just to thank everybody for their work on this, and yeah, we'll come back to yourself and the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We welcome this document. I think it's been good, the focus that's been given to carers through the general election campaign. I think David did a splendid job highlighting the issue in his very entertaining way. Can I thank Councillor Humphries and the Scrutiny Panel for the work they've done as well. I think that's a useful contribution to what we what we've heard. 30,000 carers in West Northamptonshire is a very significant number of people. I suppose most of us at one stage of our lives have been, or some stage of our lives have been in a caring position. And it is stressful. It often affects our ability to work. And for some people, it pushes them into poverty because of their caring responsibilities. And it can be isolating. And the frustrating thing can sometimes be accessing appropriate services for the person you're caring for. So it is one of the most challenging life phases that most of us face. So it's important that we have the right support structures in place, and hopefully this document leads us in that direction. Pleased with the comments for the consultation. What we need to do is make sure we continue to listen to carers kind of every day with every involvement we have with them. So the consultation isn't a one-off, but an ongoing process. I suppose the challenge to us is the issue of delivery and kind of bringing in the scope and choice element of it. You know, is in year 2, which is kind of a year too late, but I guess we have to phase things appropriately. And the transport thing in year 4, well, that's a long way off, and it would be good if there's some way of bringing that forward. So this is a very welcome document, and congratulations to the officers who've been involved in it. But my key point is we need to continue to listen to carers.
Thank you, Bob. Councillor Beardsworth.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, I welcome this report. I think anybody who actually experienced people who look after people at home, and having been a nurse and a district nurse and seen the amount of work that people do looking after their loved ones, I do hope that we can now highlight some of those people and get them come forward to get assistance, because as reading in your report, it says with the current cost of living crisis, many of them are suffering with cutting back on eating and heating. They're 63% are worrying about managing their monthly costs. There's lots of things here that have highlighted the plight of the carer, and what we must do is actually help them. I know Ed Davey did an awful lot of work to highlight this, and because he's a carer himself for his grandmother and his son. So I think it's very important that we actually get this news out to people. It's no good having a strategy if people don't know about it, and if we can get that message out. Can I also ask Councillor Golby if he's going to do an annual report? Instead of going to the Wellbeing Board, it can go there, but I think it ought to come to council as well, because we need to be kept up to date on how progress is being made to look after the carers in our wards and everything else like that. So we don't all attend the Wellbeing Board, so it would be better if we could come to council as well. The same report, not a different one, but just so that we've got it highlighted. And please, this is going ahead, and I'm hopeful that it will make a difference to the people that are looking after their loved ones at home, especially the youngsters that go to school. They need extra care, really, because it's a huge thing when somebody's having to look after a parent. So well done for getting the report here, and let's hope that it does an awful lot of good.
Thank you, Councillor Beardsworth. I'll pass over to Councillor Golby to respond to some of the points raised by you and Councillor Purser.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for the positive comments. It is, I agree, a really good piece of work that was co-produced with an expert group, and we're keeping that group on to, to get feedback from, and we have said that we'll come back in a year, and if we need to make changes, we can flex and incorporate those changes. We have got the delivery. We have sort of put together an outcomes framework based on some of the statements that we got from
from the initial consultation, and we're going to try and hold ourselves account to those statements, basically. And as regards to bringing back to council, I'm sure we can find a way of either bringing it through cabinet or back to council to give a bit of an annual update, as well as going back to the Health and Wellbeing Board. But yeah, I welcome comments by opposition colleagues, and we again acknowledge the huge important role that carers play in supporting us as a local authority to help support, you know, their loved ones. So I'm very happy we accept the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
I just wanted to add that I'm a member of the Carers Partnership, and over the last 2 or 3 meetings that we've had, this has been discussed in depth and their views were sent forward as well. So that is a group of carers who are out in our district council area. And there's quite a large number of them there, and they have had input into this as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So the recommendation is at paragraph 3 that Cabinet approves the carer strategy for publication. Are we all agreed? Thank you very much. Item 8 is the local transport plan. Councillor Larratt.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I do, can I just say that Councillor Gonzalez de Savage has texted me and said, just so you know, the sound on YouTube has failed, so no voice is being heard. So
I believe that's now been resolved,
right.
thanks to the work of our colleagues in Democratic Services.
It's about 3 minutes ago. Sorry. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This item provides an update on work to develop the new local transport plan for West Northamptonshire, and seeks delegated authority for the approval of the draft plan for public consultation. The council has a statutory requirement to have an up-to-date local transport plan, and this provides a long-term strategy for transport service delivery and improvement. This is the first local transport plan of West Northamptonshire Council, replacing the 2012 plan of the County Council. The new plan has been in development since last summer and has been guided in its development by officer, councillor and wider transport stakeholder groups. So there's been full engagement all the way through the process, Chairman. It's built on an updated transport evidence base and informed by environmental, equalities, health and habitats assessments, which will be published as part of the consultation. We will also publish a carbon impact assessment to illustrate the contribution the plan is expected to make to future emissions and overall net zero aims. The plan itself provides a long-term strategy with a short-term implementation plan for the next 5 years. Central to the plan is its 2045 vision for local transport and its 6 transport objectives presented under the 3 themes of connecting people better, shaping healthier places, and mobility enabling prosperity. The plan provides an updated set of policies and priority interventions to deliver our vision and a monitoring framework for how we will measure its success. We will commence a public consultation on a refined version of the draft plan, which is included in the report appendices, later this month. The consultation will be open for 12 weeks. And if people are saying, okay, it's over the summer, we have extended it to 12 weeks and it runs more or less to mid, if not beyond mid-October. So we have been very careful about that consultation period. Following the consultation period, we will update the plan with feedback received and aim for the council to adopt it early next year. Details of the public consultation are included in the report, and it will be widely promoted. Members of the transport team will be undertaking in-person events at key locations, as well as organising virtual drop-in sessions to engage as many people as possible. Details of all the events and ways to take part in the consultation will be included on the consultation web pages, as well as in notices to be circulated to libraries, parish and town councils, etc. I would encourage, Mr. Chairman, anyone with an interest in how we might improve walking and cycling provision, bus services and infrastructure, and our roads and railways to take part in the consultation and to let us know your thoughts on the plan. And finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to thank all our officers and staff who've been involved in developing this new plan from the very outset, and their hard work and effort is much appreciated. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lowett. I've got several speakers listed to speak on this item. In order, Councillors Barter, Purser, is that right? Bob, you're speaking on this item. Holland Delamere, Humphreys and Harris. So if I can invite Councillor Barter to address Cabinet.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to say that I welcome the local transport plan as a comprehensive and professional piece of work that councillors have had the opportunity to engage with, and several have. I'd like to pick up just one issue touched on in the plan, and that's the benefits of HS2 for the West Northants area in the form of released capacity, enabling better local and interurban services at the stations and railways that already serve us. I won't go into detail because a cabinet paper in July 2022 described the potential and set out our aspirations. And since then, I've been in touch with the shadow operator of HS2 and the West Coast route, the West Coast Partnership, and Network Rail to talk further about the opportunities. Unfortunately, the Rail Minister himself declined to meet us. But worse than that, the October 2023 decision to delay Euston and cancel the West Midlands to Crewe section has made reaping these benefits much more difficult. Not having Euston for HS2 trains limits the number of trains that can be run on the new line. Capacity constraints south of Crewe, where the new line joins the existing, will limit the number of extra trains that can be run on the existing line. That doesn't mean there are no benefits for us, but they are more limited and must be worked for, potentially in competition with other stakeholders. But having committed to the most expensive and disruptive part of HS2 through our area, by tacking an inadequate terminus on at one end and feeding trains straight into a bottleneck at the other, the previous Prime Minister's decision will prevent the new infrastructure from being used to its full potential. I can't see that that's any comfort to those who are actually affected by it, and it's against the interests of West Northants as a whole. So what to do? And the actions for us are to re-establish communication with the West Coast Partnership to see how their analysis is fitting with the new situation of the limited infrastructure. And in fact, I've already done that. Then I think to work through our new MPs to try and get a contact with the new Rail Minister. We'll let the MPs settle down for a day or two, and I don't think the relevant minister has actually been appointed yet, but I'm keeping an eye on that. And to seek a meeting and lobby for the earliest possible availability of Euston, and ultimately for reinstatement of the new infrastructure past the Staffordshire bottlenecks through to Crewe. So I'd simply like Cabinet to express support for those objectives and for the local transport plan overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barter. I will let Councillor Lowett respond to those points when he sums up. In the meantime, Councillor Purser, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too was involved in the councillor group that was looking at this plan and welcome it going out to consultation. Hopefully this plan will tackle some of the connectivity issues we've got within West Northants, work out how to grow walking and cycling and make sure we've got the proper infrastructure in place, make sure our villages are not isolated from our towns, and sort out some of the issues within our town centre, which I think go back to the, well, historically and certainly to the Development Corporation days, and perhaps to some of the actions of Northampton Borough Council to do with the bus station and Abingdon Street. We also have a crisis in public transport, which Councillor Holland-Delamere will talk about. So it's really important that the public engages with this consultation, certainly the interest groups, the walkers and the cyclists, the railway users, but also people who are not part of those groups, so that people who are isolated either in rural areas or on some of our town estates, it's important their voice is heard. It's important that older people who are kind of isolated and find it difficult getting around, young people who are not car drivers, people with disabilities. So it's important that we have a good consultation which engages particularly people who don't have the benefit of being drivers. Thank you. My question really to Councillor Larratt is, are we going to make sure we access those groups?
Thank you. Councillor Holland-Delamere, please.
Just thank you for Councillor Barter's comments, and I'm happy to assist with in any way that we to get that cross-party sort of engagement on the railway needs of our area. I welcome this report. It is forward-thinking and it's taken on board a lot of the comments that we've made over the past couple of years trying to shape this. So I really do welcome it. And I won't repeat what I said about the bus strategy because that feeds into this. So I've already made those comments. The only things that I will just comment on is definitely we do need to better rail connectivity here in the area. We do feel a bit like a backwater at times, and harnessing that integration between buses and trains is, I think, crucial for the thriving of this area, especially picking up those Long Buckby, Daventry, and those Oxford and that sort of east-west sort of connectivity. When I go to see family down in Loudwater, High Wycombe Way, it's into London and back out again. It's terrible connectivity. So being part of that regional conversation to do that integration is definitely welcome, and being part of those partnerships, I think, crucial. We'll highlight the fact that I'm glad to see that affordability has been put into this strategy, because like I said last time, we've got the £2 issue at the moment in the rural areas, and the prices of the monthly, weekly prices went up again at the end of June, much to the annoyance of regular passengers. So I'm happy that we've taken that into consideration in this report, and certainly work cross-party to make representations to get the investment we need for our area.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Humphreys.
Thank you. I very much welcome this report and forthcoming
consultation, which will be of particular interest to rural residents, many of whom have expressed to me in my ward their wish to be able to leave their car at home and take a safe cycling route to essential services. One thing I would question is in the travel hierarchy proposed that the first two priorities have been reversed in if you compare with the East Economic Heartlands travel hierarchy. In other words, in the transport body's new travel hierarchy, the first principle is active travel modes, pedestrians and cyclists, and the second is enabling access to services and opportunities without the need for motorised travel. I'm not sure why they're reversed in the proposed one in this report, but quite possibly because of the predominance of our rural areas and thinking that there is inevitable some car dependency, but that, to my mind, that could be much reduced given the extensive existing public right-of-way network, which is referred to in the report, which connects urban areas to the countryside and does provide excellent opportunities for residents to walk, wheel or ride. Says in the report, upgrading of routes will enable greater numbers to participate. This to me is the low-hanging fruit projects also mentioned in the report, which require small levels of additional investment, which would enable rural communities to be better connected to primary service villages. There's one in question in my ward in Yelvertoft, which has no transport, no bus, a delicatessen, but otherwise no amenities. But a mere 2 kilometres away is Crick with its GP, post office, sports facilities, co-op, etc. I often see mobility scooters go up the Yelvertoft road, which is not at all safe, and a number of cyclists feel unsafe going up there, whereas in lockdown, when we had so much less traffic, people would use that route regularly. There's a bridleway which could be developed as a cycleway, which although locals, having been surveyed about this, would prefer the road route, but in terms of cost, the bridleway would provide access to Crick. Just a suggestion for the consultations. I think residents would be really, well, some would welcome information about how much carbon CO2 they'd save if they walked and cycled. I have in mind a very good event that was held in Kilsby last year when there were various information boards, and one of them really stuck in my mind, which was if your 8-mile journey to Rugby or Daventry, it's sort of equidistant there. If you cycled, or if you didn't take that journey, you'd be saving the equivalent of 2 bags of sugar in CO2. And I think that sort of information is highly motivating. So those are my reflections anyway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think you're hearing from quite a lot of the people that were representatives on the working group, which is good to see, and hopefully it shows the level of engagement and commitment that we all have around this particular issue. A couple of points that I'd like to make, if I may. First is this is a very important document, and it sets out some actually quite challenging visions and aims for us to achieve within the time frame that's set out. Firstly, I want to make the point about consultation on this. I think it's really important. We've heard from Bob actually a couple of comments about accessibility. There are a lot of people who use transport in rural areas who are mature, and they aren't naturally the people that will gravitate to complete surveys online, is fair to say. So I want to really just emphasize that point and make sure that we have a strategy for ensuring that we can include those people as best as we possibly can. We have a community bus group in my area. We have quite an active bus user group. It's informal, it's not as established. But if we can get comments collected on that route, or those routes in my area, I'd be very happy to find a way of making that happen, because I don't think we're going to automatically get people going online to fill it in. That's the point that I'm trying to make. Can we also make sure that the online version of the survey isn't just multiple choice options, that we need people just to be able to drop an email in with 1 or 2 lines if they've got a specific comment that they want to make. My main point really relates to the comments made in section 7.7.1. I could read them out, but it's probably easier just to refer to them, where it's talking about the LTP is considered to have a beneficial impact on climate change. The answer to that is yes, of course it is. But only if it's fully implemented. And it's a general point that we need to make sure that we aren't just saying this is going to be really good for the climate. It will only be good for the climate, actually, if we do what it says in the document itself. The document itself is not going to achieve any of that. So it's a wording issue for me. I think we just need to be a little bit more cautious and careful with wording that we put into our documents. Because you could read that and interpret it and just saying it's marvelous, it's all going to be great. And there's a reality that sits behind it. For full transparency, I'd welcome understanding how much we've actually invested in the consultancy side of things to get this done. And the reason I raise that is because tonight we should have had originally the climate strategy being presented. And we've made an agreement in the sustainability group that there was some pre-engagement work that will be worth doing. But today at our sustainability meeting, the timetable for that now looks like it's set to go back to March 2025. Now, clearly, all of these issues are related, and it seems slightly disjointed that we're talking about the positive impact of climate here, and we still don't have our climate strategy in place yet. So I'm asking the question about funding and resourcing, because I suspect that's part of our challenge in terms of getting the climate plan fully delivered and put in place. So I don't need the answer tonight. I can take that answer offline if that's more appropriate to do. But I just want to re-emphasize the issue that these things are great. They're fantastic documents. They're very visionary and they're very forward thinking, but we have to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Lowett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, can I just say that I entirely agree with Councillor Barter on his comments with regard to HS2. You know, we were sold the benefits of HS2 capacity wise, and now we've ended up with a curtailed HS2 that does nothing to enhance rail capacity or improve rail services for West Northamptonshire. And to stop HS2 at the Staffordshire bottleneck just does nothing whatsoever. And the far more sensible thing to have done would have been taking it on to Crewe if they were going to curtail it. But no, I totally agree with what Councillor Barter says, and I'm happy to endorse the points that he makes. We talked about infrastructure and the need to engage with the public. I totally agree. We need to make sure the voices of everybody is heard, and we need a good consultation exercise. And particularly, we need to access those who are isolated in rural areas, and we need to be able to access particularly young people who have a big interest in transport when they don't drive, etc. So we need to make sure that that's right. And that was the theme of several speakers, Mr. Chairman, and we will take that on board going forward. Keith, thank you for your comments and particularly your willingness to assist about rail connectivity, etc. That's very important and very helpful. The interchange with buses again is important, and we'll happily pick that up. This is only approved in draft tonight, and there's a few issues to be tweaked and tightened up on, and Stuart and I both got notes of these, and we've got a meeting, I think, in a couple of weeks' time to finalise it, and we'll try and take these on. Keith referred to the question of the link to Loudwater. Well, the problem there is that the government, in their wisdom, have not taken forward the Aylesbury link. Were the Aylesbury link to go in, there would be better north-south connectivity linking West Northamptonshire into Old Oak Common, which would certainly assist Keith in accessing Loudwater, I think, Phil. So, you know, there's a lot of lack of vision in what's happened in the cancellation of a lot of these policies. And again, we talked about, we've heard what you said, Rosie, about the hierarchy, and Stuart and I'll discuss that. And again, you talked about rural communities, etc. And Yelvertoft, I know, has its problems, and I've been out there a couple of times and seen those for myself. And we can certainly look at some examples of carbon savings in relation to walking and cycling as opposed to driving or whatever. We'll see if there's anything we can do on that. Not saying we can, but we'll certainly have a look at it. Yes, it is an important document setting out our vision, and again, very, very important to our rural areas. Yeah, buses, we do need to make sure that we communicate and get the views of buses and bus users. I'm happy to ensure consultation with the bus user group. I was at a meeting with bus operators this morning, and I think they'll be very happy to publicise the consultation on their vehicles. So again, you know, people on buses can pick up that this consultation is ongoing and can participate. And I hear what Jonathan said about climate, and we'll look at that. But on that basis, Chair, I think it's right that this goes out to consultation. We need to get a good consultation, and we'll work on that, and we'll work to tweak the report to pick up issues made tonight and to complete the other points that are still outstanding. But on that basis, I'm happy to move the recommendations within the report, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lowett. I think it will be one of the early tests of the new government's seriousness about economic growth as to whether they invest in this sort of key infrastructure in our region and others, because without that investment in infrastructure, we will struggle to secure economic growth, particularly East West Rail, which when we met with England's economic heartland was a very exciting proposal, and I think absolutely vital to realising the potential of the pan-regional partnership that we're involved with and other key projects moving forward.
Absolutely. And the director has just showed me a press release saying that the new rail minister fuels hopes for HS2 revival. So the appointment of Lord Hendy hailed as a boost for chances of extending the network. I don't care how far they extend it, as long as they extend it to Crewe, and that will certainly help West Northamptonshire. I'm being parochial, but yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lowett. The recommendations at paragraph 3 are quite lengthy, so I won't read them out in full, but are we all in agreement with them? Thank you very much. Moving on then to item 9, which is capital investment in adult daycare service. Councillor Longley's name is against the report, but in his absence, Councillor Golby is going to take us through it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So capital investment in adults daycare services. So we are looking to seek approval for additional capital budget to enable the relocation of the adults daycare facility in Towcester from the Riverside Centre to this building, the Forum, to improve the service offered and create more efficient and effective arrangements. The council owns and operates the Riverside Resource Centre in Towcester. It is used to provide daycare for adults with a range of needs. The service could be improved and financial benefits achieved by relocating it to the Forum, and the future use of the building will be the subject of a later report. Works to convert part of the first floor of the Forum will be carried out as part of the office optimisation phase 2 works. They are estimated to cost 0.478 million, for which a capital budget would be created. The outcome should be beneficial for service users and for the council, residents, taxpayers as a whole. It is recommended that Cabinet creates an additional capital budget of 0.478 million to be added to the office optimisation phase 2 budget for the purpose of providing facilities at the forum to enable the daycare facility to be relocated and for allied purposes. So I'm happy to present and recommend approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. We have two speakers on this item, Councillors Bob Purser and Jonathan Harris. Councillor Purser is passing on his request to speak, so just Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Chair. A very small point, but I think an important point. There's no real issue or quibble with the sense that it presents in terms of potential savings. So clearly that makes an awful lot of sense. So the maths appear to stack up in the paper that's presented in front of us. It's a wider concern or a wider issue, which actually Martin and I have had a discussion on this, so it's not something he's not aware of. And it's really in regard to future use of legacy buildings. We have now got quite a number of legacy buildings. And whilst I appreciate it's not always easy to have a determination about how those buildings are going to be utilised for the future, it does sometimes seem like decisions are made to consolidate and save costs without necessarily having full thought about what happens to the legacy building. So it's just a request, really. Would it be possible for us to please have information on how many legacy buildings we've got as a result of closures, and specifically what we're paying for those in terms of any ongoing running costs for security or anything of that nature. In my own area, Boniface House closed some time ago, and I know I keep being told there are discussions going on about what might happen to that building, but I get no further. And I have to say, as a local ward councillor, it's quite frustrating when you're being told it's going to be repurposed, but nobody will even give you a clue about what that repurposing looks like. So it's just a frustration, really, both on the cost front, but also what's going to happen to these buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. I mean, I think it's clear that the process simply of mothballing a building creates immediate savings. However, for the sake of the local community, we wouldn't want an empty building to be sat there for too long. We clearly do want to repurpose and find a buyer or a new use for that building. But the Exec Director for Place and Economy may wish to add to that.
Yeah, thank you. And just to give some assurance that what we're doing and what we'll be presenting to Cabinet in the very near future will be proposals that look at all of the issues that we've talked about over the previous year in terms of adult care, children's trust, supported housing, etc., etc., etc. So rather than just looking at these buildings in isolations, we've been looking at it as a programme, been looking at it across all of the service areas to make sure that we get that absolute benefit for our communities and for the services, but also that we make best use of the buildings in the right places. So we will be presenting a paper of a series and quite a large number of the buildings that you're referring to, and including the one that you reference as well. So lots of work being going on behind the scenes to make sure we get the right strategy that isn't just about saving money, it's about better service provision as well. So hopefully that will be sharing quite soon.
Thank you, Stuart. Anything further to add, Matt?
Only that's a fair point raised by Councillor Harris. If any of us have one of these such buildings in our ward, we'd rightfully want to know what was going on with it, really, aside from the point around the efficiency and costs associated to the council. So yeah, other than that, I'm happy to recommend the paper for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the recommendation is that Cabinet creates an additional capital budget of 0.478 million to be added to the office optimisation budget for the purpose of providing facilities at the forum to enable the daycare facility to be relocated and for allied purposes. Are we all in agreement? Thank you, that's agreed. So we move on to item 10 on the agenda, which is replacing digital file storage, and Councillor Hallam's going to take us through this.
Thank you very much. It's a really simple one, really. It's to commence the procurement process on replacing our digital file storage. In techie speak, that's called a SAN. I've mentioned something a few times when we've brought these various reports forward to highlight the age of some of the systems that we are doing. And I'll mention it again tonight for context. But if you go to PC World tonight, and you buy a laptop, and tomorrow morning that laptop is pulled end of life, the manufacturer is obligated to provide support for another 7 years. So you've still got support on that device for 7 years. So when you think about our SAN, that's coming out. The reason why I'm having to place it is it's out of that maintenance period. So it's out of that 7 years. And obviously it's very unlikely that on the day that it was purchased by NCC, that it was then the following day, it was then made end of life, which means it's at least 10 years old, which in terms of this type of tech is very, very ancient. And there's also some really good environmental benefits in those 10 years that have passed in the new equipment that's out. So that's also mentioned in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Hallam. Just one speaker on this item, Councillor Purser.
Thank you. I'm going to be brief on this as well. Just to welcome this. Any investment we make in our IT is really welcome, and this is part of that. I just want to check that the location of the server will be secure and will be safe and won't bring the kind of problems we had in the early days of this authority. And the second question is, in the paper, it says that our systems are not yet ready to go into the cloud. Does Councillor Hallam have any sense when we will be ready for that, to get to that stage for our storage to be in the cloud?
So there's 2 points. In terms of the security element, obviously it will be, and it's part of the paper refers to the backup as well. So the backup is just as important as the initial system. So that's going to be it's a critical part of it moving forward. Actually, it kind of dovetails into the topic of the cloud, because one of the reasons why some authorities or some organizations aren't going wholly into the cloud is because actually it's still seen that SAN is still seen as maybe slightly more secure than the cloud, because SAN is traditionally backed up by tape storage rather than backed up on the cloud, and you can't hack a tape, but you can obviously hack the internet. So that's one of the reasons. The strategy that we're developing here has always been cloud first. Doesn't mean it's cloud only. The reason why we're not going into the cloud yet is we're simply not ready for it. There's lots of digital data out there, and we've got to get, the first thing we've got to do is put that in the first, the right place. It's disappointing to me as well that we're not ready to go for the cloud yet, but we're not. Once we've got that working properly with all of the systems in terms of transformation, then that will be a point to then look at the cloud. So it's difficult to say when I estimate that to be, but I would estimate it to be in the next term of the council at this stage.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purser. Anything, presumably nothing further to add, Councillor Hallam?
No, happy to move to the vote.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to authorise the Chief Information Officer to award a contract for the provision to the Council of replacement SAN equipment and services in compliance with the Council's procurement processes, contract procedure rules and procurement legislative requirements. Said contract to replace existing provisions supplying services to the Council. Are we all in agreement? That's agreed. Thank you very much. Item 11 is Broadmead Court and commissioning of a housing support provider with Councillor Herring to present.
Thank you. Broadmead Court has been purchased to provide 18 self-contained residential units for homeless individuals and rough sleepers with complex needs such as drug and alcohol dependency, which together with intensive support can help individuals into a more stable living environment. The council has been awarded 3.2 million from the Department of Levelling Up and Homes England for single homelessness accommodation programme known as SHAP. 1.8 million has been granted for the purchase and refurbishment of Broadmead, and a further almost 1.5 million for the targeted support required. It is not thought that there is sufficient expertise in-house to provide the intensive support required. It is therefore recommended that we go out to find a suitable provider for a period of 3 years with possibly a 1-year extension that can provide the wraparound service 24/7 to help individuals with their complex needs. They will also collaborate with partners to address residents' physical and mental health needs and allow them to turn their life around. In the recommendations, can I just point out that the Director of Housing and Communities should read Director Communities and Opportunities, both in Part B and Part C. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herring. We have 3 speakers on this item, Councillors Purser, Beardsworth and Harris. Bob?
Yes, this is a welcome initiative and it's fully supported, and I think ward councillors are also supportive of it. Just to ask, there were a number of people who were moved out of Broadmead Court. Are we sure that they were all found suitable accommodation when they moved out, and to know where they're now living? And then I think when we're procuring this, it's very important that the quality of service is as important as the price, and that it really is a proper wraparound service with very good links with our kind of existing provision within Northampton. So just to check that those will be very much part of the tendering process.
Thank you, Bob. Councillor Beardsworth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little bit concerned because in 2010 and 11, I built Oasis House. It was actually after I left office that it was officially opened, and it was to go together with Midland Heart to set up a place where people could move into, get help, and then stay there for 6 months and then move on. That hasn't happened. People have been there up to 3 years, and it hasn't done the job that it was supposed to do, which was to enable people to live a better life, to get over their addictions, and to move on and become housed with us, primarily, with the council. That hasn't happened. So I'm a little bit sceptical about Broadmead, because I really have concerns that unless we get the right people in there, you're going to find an uphill struggle. I mean, when you drive around town at the moment and see how many tents there are and people living outside, which is fine in this weather, but what's going to happen to these people in the winter? And I thought by 2030, we were going to eradicate homelessness altogether. And so is this an expenditure that we don't need? But I think we do. But I think we really need to do something to help the homeless. It's very difficult with the homeless because they're very clannish. They like to be together, but some of them don't want to be together with others if they've got problems. So I think it really, really depends on the provider, the service you're going to bring in to help these people, because it didn't work on Oasis House as it was intended to work. And it's got to help people get back to a normal sort of life. We did talk about Homes First at one time, which was actually getting somebody into accommodation and working with them while they're in their own home, a 1-bedroom flat. But that didn't actually transpire. So I really have some concerns. I wish it well because I want it to succeed, but we've got to get the right people in there to make it work better than it did in Oasis House. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beardsworth. I don't think anyone would refute the suggestion that getting the right provider is absolutely crucial in anything like this. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. This, I would say, is extremely welcome proposal, and very supportive of this approach. Probably my disappointment is it's not until June next year. But obviously there are clear reasons why that's the case, and if there's anything we can do to accelerate the process, then I would welcome that. This is a very pertinent live issue at the moment for me in Brixworth, as we have a rough sleeper in Brixworth. And I've had various conversations with him, and one of the issues that he has is he wants a safe space and doesn't feel that anything that we can offer him currently provides that safe space. Whether that's reality or perception, I don't know, but that's certainly his. But it's a wider view that I want to emphasize around this. I think it's starting to show. I've lived in Britsworth for 28 years. It's the first time we've ever had, to my knowledge, a rough sleeper actually camping out in the village. Has been moved once for his own safety and now has come back to a different location. I should say officers are all fully aware, and I've been talking with officers and I know that they're doing what they can. But it's hard to tell at this stage whether this is an isolated incident or whether this potentially is the tip of an iceberg or something that we might see wider. So I have a plea really, which is that I think it would be really useful and practical for us to provide parishes with guidelines on what they do in this situation. I'm not sure whether that exists very clearly or transparently at the moment, other than accessing the West Northants website, which if we could include contacts and specifically powers that exist on what they can and can't do within that situation, that would help. The parish council in Britsworth are managing quite a difficult situation, and of course you've got residents who think that you can just pick somebody up and move them, which of course you can't. So I think that's just a wider issue that's emerging from this, and if there is a way that we can backfill that for other parishes, hopefully this is an isolated incident. It's not going to be a pattern that we see, but I think that will be something that hopefully would be useful and productive to do. And Jane and I spoke earlier on this evening, and hopefully Jane and I will continue the conversations about this particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Just before I hand back to Councillor Herring, just want to address a point made by Councillor Purser, which was about the rehoming of the former Broadmead Court residents. Obviously, I was the portfolio holder at the time that we kicked off this process, and so I followed the transition arrangements for those former residents very, very closely, thanks to an awful lot of hard work by our housing teams. I mean, an awful lot of hard work. Every single resident was found a new place to live, and you know, I think the level of support that those teams offered the residents there was unparalleled. And we didn't have a legal duty to offer that support at the time, but we felt that we had a moral duty to provide assistance, given the arrangements that the owner of the building was putting in place in order to allow us to take vacant possession of Broadmead Court. So I think it's a real success story in that regard, when it was actually a very difficult time for those residents. And I think our team has reacted very sensitively to their needs. And so I applaud their hard work in that endeavour.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to reassure the various speakers that there's been a stakeholder panel looking at the terms of the contract, which has included present homeless that are feeding in their lived experience. And I will obviously oversee the terms of the contract when it goes out as well. So I take on board all of those comments. And the problem that was raised about Oasis House and the length of stay, I think the problem is to unblock the whole system the whole way down the chain. And there are other things that we are doing within the housing portfolio, which we hope will actually get the system moving better, because there has to be places to move people on to when they've recovered, and that's the blockage at the moment, that there just aren't enough places and enough houses to do this. But we're working on it all the way through the system, and there'll be more papers coming to Cabinet showing what action we're taking. Thank you. And the guidelines for councillors, I presume Jane Carr has taken on board that, and we'll have a look at that as to what can be provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herring. There are 3 recommendations before Cabinet at paragraph 3. I won't read them out in full, but are we in agreement with those recommendations? Thank you very much. They're agreed. Item 12 is the recommissioning of supported living, and Councillor Golby's to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. So supported living is an important service that helps to keep people independent and living in the community. It allows someone to have their own place to live with their own front door key while still getting access to the care and support they need. It allows people the opportunity to live with their friends if they want to, in an environment that is far less restrictive than a traditional care home setting. It also allows them to have a choice over who provides their care and support services. The council supports people who are eligible for supported living services by helping them to find the most suitable home to live in and to help them attain the support they need to remain independent and live the life they want to live. We currently support 415 people with this type of service with varying needs and through a number of different contractual arrangements. The council is therefore proposing that we align current contracting options into a single supported living framework over a 5-year contract framework, with the option to extend by 2 years. This approach will allow our colleagues in the ICB to join, which is a good thing, the contract at a later date under a single fee structure, which is informed by a cost of care exercise. This approach will allow us to strengthen and form new partnerships with our supported living providers under our LAP-based model. To allow this to happen, the current contractual framework will need to be extended by 5 years for the commissioning of a good life framework, where notice will be served on the supported living lot to allow for the new commission solution to be in place by the 6th of April 2025, and by 96 days for the Murray Lodge care and support in specialist housing framework. The request of Cabinet is therefore to support the recommendations outlined in 3.1 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Golby. We have 2 speakers on this item, Councillors Purser and Squires.
Thank you, Chair. Could I start by thanking you for your answer to the previous item and reassurance that that's given? Much appreciated, and appreciation to the staff team who put that in process. So thank you for that. Second thing I just need to say is Councillor Randall sent her apologies. She is at a family graduation event, so she's not able to be with us. So on to the matter in hand. In budgetary terms, this is the biggest item on our agenda tonight. It's £30 million or £300 million, depending on how you cast it. It's about 1/10 of the council's budget. So it really is a very significant item for us to be considering. As I read the document, it seems a very rational approach to the commissioning of these particular services. And I welcome particularly that we're going to be working with other East Midlands authorities so that we're not in competition with them, that we're cooperating with them. That's got to be a good thing. So understanding this as a framework, but it does delegate huge powers to the Deputy Director and the Deputy Leader. And I just wonder, I want to be sure that the Section 151 officer is happy and content that we're going to have sufficient scrutiny of the finances of this as we go forward, because it is such a large item and because it's in the recent past has been such a high risk area of our budget, really. So I want to be sure that our procedures are really robust in terms of this, and that we're not I suppose say signing a blank check is to oversimplify it, but you get my point that we're making a kind of big decision here, and I want to make sure that the procedures we've got as a council are robust enough to deal with that. So that really is my question, and I suppose I've got 2 other questions. Does it give us the flexibility to bring some services in-house if we think that's the best way of doing that? And is it flexible enough for us to deal with what is going to be, I think, a changing health and care landscape over the next five years or so? So is the framework got flexibility built into it? So those are my questions at this stage, but I think this will be an ongoing kind of discussion on effective provision of these services.
Thank you, Councillor Purser. Councillor Squires.
Thank you, Chair. In principle, our group welcome the report and the stated aim of actually bringing greater financial certainty. Also want to echo Councillor Purser's comments and fully agree with what you're saying. However, I do have 3 comments or issues raised by the report. If I read it correctly, we are seeking to limit the number of providers. If we do, can we be sure we're actually getting value for money out of that and not overpaying for these services? Secondly, we are concerned about the risk that providers may not want to bid for the services under these terms. That would leave us with no service. Have we done any preliminary investigations with the providers and their willingness to engage? Is there a fallback position or plan B? Obviously, we've got a legal obligation to provide those services. And lastly, we see the priority aims under section 5.15. Can we ensure that the monitoring and reporting is in place to identify if these schemes are actually having a positive impact on the individuals concerned, the providers are performing to expectations, and that council in general is satisfied with the contract? Thank you.
Some good points raised there by both our speakers. Should we go to the Executive Director for Adults first of all?
Thank you, Leader. So first up, everybody gets excited when they see a report that's got 300 odd million attached to it. So just for a level of reassurance, the report isn't requesting 300 odd million pounds worth of additional funding. It's about providing a contract value that allows us to take forward these services for the future. So if we did nothing, we currently spend 30 million a year on supported living services. 7 years, that's 210 million. The intention of expanding the framework value is about actually giving us the flexibility to do a lot of the things, Councillor Purser, that you've suggested. So we're currently working, for example, with the Integrated Care Board, and we've taken on commissioning responsibility for continuing healthcare placements into care homes, and we're having a conversation about domiciliary care. We want to do exactly the same and get into a position whereby we are able to commission on behalf of the ICB, because that means that we can control in many ways their spend. So that headroom that we're creating within the framework allows us to do that bit. The next bit is about our overall strategic intent. We are absolutely committed to keep as many people, particularly under 65, living within their own homes rather than within a residential setting. If somebody lives within a residential setting, they get a personal allowance, which is about 30 odd quid. So if you're a young person, 24, living in a care home setting, you're going to have 30 odd quid to live your life. That's one trip out to Wetherspoons and then you're done for the week. So our overall strategic intent is to support as many people as we can to continue to live in their own homes in supported living settings. So again, the headroom allows for us to support more people to move out of residential placements into supported living services. And in that context, I think I've mentioned this does give us an increased flexibilities to support any form of integration that is either on the horizon or is knocking at our door today. In relation to the notion around limiting the number of providers, we're following a bit of a proven track record with this. So from an adult social care perspective, this supported living contract is probably the last legacy contract of significant value that we have from NCC. If I look at the work that we've previously done and implemented really effectively around domiciliary care, we had 93 providers working across West Northants with rates that went from £14 an hour up to £29 an hour. In exactly the same way that we're taking forward this contract, we now have a position where we have just 15 providers who all have a rate which ranges from £18.50 to £20.50, dependent upon the urban or rurality of the area. In that context, our unit cost on domiciliary care has come down. But at the same time, we've given providers an economy of scale, which is allowing them for the first time to provide capacity in areas like Saith Northants that previously we've really struggled with. So in that context, the approach we're taking forward has got a proven track record of actually giving better value for money for us as we move forward. In relation to engaging the providers, this report has been part of a level of soft market testing and market engagement. When we've spoken to the providers, they clearly articulate an inability to innovate because there are so many providers with teeny tiny allocations of funding from us, which means their ability to kind of work with us as a strategic partner is absolutely diminished. We will see, as a result of this, a number of smaller organisations either needing to collaborate with bigger organisations or falling away. But in relation to that ability to monitor the effectiveness of these providers, the approaches that we've taken forward so far, like in domiciliary care, means that instead of evaluating the effectiveness of 93 providers and looking at their quality, we're looking at just 15, which means with certainty I can put my hand up and say those 15 are good providers, and exactly the same would apply in this scenario. So I think, Chair, I've covered off those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Golby.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Stuart, for those responses there. Councillor Purser mentioned around monitoring, and I think this would be something that perhaps scrutiny could have a look at to see how we are progressing and what outcomes we're getting and what efficiencies we're getting, as Stuart just mentioned there. But overall, I don't think there's anything more I need to add other than I think this is a very positive step forward for lots of good reasons, and I'm happy to propose the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. There was one quite specific question directed towards our 151 officer, so I'll pass over to him for a response.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I support everything that Stuart has said. I think the only thing that I would add in terms of corporate oversight is that we've got these new boards that have just come into place, which look at the way the whole governance is being rearranged and transformations rearranged. We used to have a procurement board. We're going to change that, or that's turned into a procurement and commissioning board. And I think through that board, we could take reports which seeks to gives an idea of progress, make sure that proper checks are taking place. And so we have that corporate oversight within that board. We can bring reports through that.
Thank you very much. So the recommendations are fourfold and they're at item 3 on the report. Are we all in agreement? Thank you very much. Those are agreed. Item 13 is the capital approval for replacement of public access computers across the library estate, and Councillor Dan Lister is going to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very simple report. This is a £125,000 request for approval to purchase and replace the IT equipment, which is now 8 years old within our libraries. So this is a shared service with North Northants, who have already committed the £125,000 for the replacement. So it's called the People's Network. It's the public access computer systems across the libraries. This goes in our libraries and our community managed libraries also. So it also runs things like the printing system, the public printing system. So it's really important for people who aren't connected within the communities to be able to access the libraries and be able to use those services. So I think it's a very good opportunity for us to do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lister. Just one speaker on this item, which is Councillor Purser.
I just had one very small question. It looks like we're having a reduced number of actual computers, and just to check how they will be distributed. Will they be equally distributed across the libraries? Will there be particular attention to the Central Library and to Western Fable Library, where I know there is kind of extensive use of those computers?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so usage has been analysed across the portfolio, so they'll be allocated based on need and requirements.
Thank you very much. So fairly straightforward. The recommendations are before you at paragraph 3 of the report. Are we all agreed? Thank you very much. That is agreed, which takes us on to item 14, which is DBS checks in relation to elected members protocol. So the issue of criminal record checks of elected members has had a bit of a potted history. Those with a longer history in local government than I will recall that in the past there were checks carried out on elected members, but that changed some 10 years ago. More recently, there's been a review of this issue, and some legislative changes have been recommended. Now, I'll address the elephant in the room, which is that obviously when we had the debate surrounding the conduct of the previous leader, there was a very strong demand from members of the public, charities, members of the council that we as a council adopt DBS checks. And when Councillor Smith, the Chief Executive, and I met with representatives of local domestic abuse charities, one of their key asks of us was that we implement a policy of DBS checks for members, and where appropriate, enhanced DBS checks for certain members. So I'm pleased to say that a little over 5 weeks later, we're fulfilling that promise to them. I think it's an important step to take to re-establish trust in this council, in this executive, and to demonstrate that none of us sat around this cabinet table have anything to hide, and nor do any of our members sat on key committees that have a strong influence over the well-being of vulnerable adults and children. So the policy is attached. I hope that people have read it. I believe it to be robust and fair. The cost to the council is limited at something like £3,000 to undertake these checks, and I hope that members will support this policy coming forward tonight. We have 3 speakers on the item: Councillors Holland Delamere, Councillor Purser, and Beardsworth.
I do really welcome this report, because I think as office holders as we are in quite high profile community leadership, there is a responsibility on us as leaders in our community to exhibit the highest levels of public service and transparency and safety for our communities. And I know in many of the voluntary roles that I have done over the years, I have required to have a DBS check. So I do welcome the fact that there is this move at the government level for legislation to make it compulsory. But I think us voluntarily taking this step is an important move to show that we are really set on making sure that we exhibit the highest levels of safety in our communities.
Councillor Purser.
Thank you, Leader, and trying to build on that without repeating what Keith has just said. It's very important that we have public confidence in our council, that we set a standard, we lead by example, and we can see what happens to institutions that get this wrong and lose public confidence. It brings us into line with other local authorities, and so it's to be welcomed. It looks a well thought through policy. My one question is whether this should be included in our WNC constitution, or whether, if it's not included in full, whether reference should be made, and whether it should be therefore be referred to the Democracy and Standards Committee for their consideration about this.
Thank you, Councillor Purser. Councillor Beardsworth. Sally.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely welcome this report. The right thing to do. When I first became a councillor, I was on the adoption panel, and I had to have an enhanced DBS. I had to have a DBS when I was a school governor. I never worried about it. And I think for anybody coming into politics, it's important that they know that this is in place as well. So, you know, for new recruits, new candidates, we need to know that their history is good. So totally welcome it, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beardsworth. Thank all opposition colleagues for their positive reception to this policy. There was one question from Councillor Purser as to whether this needs to be incorporated into the Constitution. I mean, it is within the gift of Cabinet to set policy. So I don't think there's a formal requirement, but I'll just consult the monitoring officer to my right to get a legal view.
I think the reason why we didn't propose it at this stage is because it's not, we're expecting legislation, and the legislation may require something slightly different to what we've got in the policy. And obviously I don't want to have to come back and change it again. So we put this in place as a preliminary step. Once it becomes a legislative step, then I think we can consider again whether or not we should put it into the Constitution. But we can reference it in the Constitution if that is felt to be what members want. And I could take a report to the next Democracy and Standards Committee to reference it if that's what members would like me to do after tonight.
I certainly think that bringing it to the attention of the Democracy and Standards Committee would be helpful in terms of their work in considering, you know, their ongoing iterations of the Constitution. So without any sense of obligating them to take action, if we could just pop this on an agenda for them to note at their next meeting, I think that would be helpful. So the single recommendation of this report is that Cabinet approves the policy on disclosure and borrowing service checks for councillors. Are we all agreed? Thank you very much. At this stage, I need to ask Cabinet to agree that under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that if the public were present, it would be likely that exempt information under paragraph 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Act would be disclosed to them. So at this stage, I need to ask the gentleman at the back to leave the room and Democratic Services to cease the